welcome in this case again to this series that we are doing with Christopher Dembik. Christopher Dembik is the head of research at Saxo Bank, macro research actually. And in this series, we are trying to understand what is going on in Europe, in the world in general regarding macro. And he's helping us to understand all this puzzle that we are getting through. So in this case, thank you, Christopher.
Thanks
it's a pleasure to have you on again. And also we have, in this case, as a co-host, I'm accompanied by Lorenzo Serratosa. Hello, Lorenzo.
Hey, how are you, everyone?
Excellent. So I have this first question regarding this very morning. The European politicians just approved the COVID recovery fund. So do you think it will help to the recovery in the European economy? Do you think this measure is going to help to the recovery, Christopher?
Well, not so much. I'm very pessimistic because I think the package is way too low. I mean, 390 billion, this is nothing regarding the magnitude of the crisis. We are facing a situation where the crisis will hit extremely hard most of the European countries. And as a matter of fact, I think the stimulus package is way too small. On the top of it, we see that part of the disbursement of the fund will happen only in 2023, 2024, which means that countries that need the most stimulus will get it only in a few years. So I think it's not enough. This is a political step, mostly very significant political step, and I think it moves towards the right direction, towards the completion of the monetary union. But in terms of macroeconomy, I don't think this is macro significant. This is not enough clearly to cope with the crisis. So I don't expect it will help much Spain, Italy, or any other countries that will need to have this kind of stimulus. What they will do at the end of the day is mostly they will resort to the bond market and they will borrow money on the market as they have always done. So I don't think this is the right way to deal with the situation, but we know the European Union is moving very slowly. I mean, I have followed up the European Union Council over the past 4 days, and it was extremely long, it was tiring, and I think everyone was exhausted. We know it works that way, and we know that at the end of the day, we should be happy of the political agreement, but I am still very critical regarding the macroeconomic agreement. I clearly think it's not enough.
Yeah,
Christopher.
Clear. Sorry, go ahead.
Some of the, I have read that some of the money that they are giving through this fund, they are gonna be engaged with some political ways, or this new of the green change or green politicals or these kind of things. Do you think that are in these ways the lost growth way in the European economy? Because for me, this sounds, kind of very nice words, but nothing at the end.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, we are facing a very strong crisis. The magnitude of the crisis is very deep. I think we still need to invest in green investment, but the problem is that green investment will create new supply chain, will create new industry, but only in the long run. I mean, this is good to invest on greens, but at the end of the day, what we need is to restore economic competitiveness, restore the economy at the end of the day very fast. So I think politicians, they like a lot to talk about climate change goals, green investment, but we don't see the real economic impact. I mean, everyone is investing in green bonds or any kind of green investment, but this is still a very small percentage of the economy. Most of the population is not working in green investment, and if you want to move towards a green economy, it will take at best decades. So it means what do you do in the interim? What do you do in order to fight unemployment, to avoid bankruptcies? So I have always been very skeptical regarding green investment. I don't think this won't happen. but it will take time to happen. So this is not the best way, I think, to deal with the crisis. And what has done politicians at the European Union Summit is mostly to force that I think it's 30% of the money needs to go to climate change. But again, the issue is that we won't create a new industry from scratch. It will take so much time. And Europe, the European Union is already lagging behind in terms of green investment. So I am very skeptical, and I don't want to say it, but at the end of the day, this is kind of wasted money, because what we need to do is to understand what kind of investment needs a country. Let's take an example. Let's imagine a country, it will have, 30% bankruptcy in the tourism sector. So what you will say you are unemployed, you don't have any company left, but you should work in the green investment industry. So you get a diploma to work in green investment. This does not make sense. It can make sense if you have a 10 years plan to stimulate the economy, and you believe that in 10-year horizon, you will have, 20% of your GDP will come from green investment. Why not in 10 years? But when you are facing a recession, what you need to do is just react, and you need to adjust. You need to understand that the money will need to go to the sectors that are in crisis. And most of them, they are not linked to any green investment. I think it's really wasted money.
Well, I see this is like a picture, Spanish picture, because the tourism here is totally broken, and yeah, this is totally clear. Okay, I have another question, Christopher, that in this case, it's changing a little bit the topic. Is why the European economy is out of the technological change and that is happening, and has no big companies in this game. Because I think this could be a solution. A solution. It could be a good way to boost the economies. But in Europe, it's like, we don't have this kind of competitor, so we can't play in the same game. So why do you think this is happening in Europe?
Well, I would clearly blame the European Commission. The problem with the European Commission is they don't want to stimulate new investment in big technology. What we need to understand is that regulation in the European Union, I think, is the most stupid regulation in the world. If you go to the US or if you go to China, what policymakers understand quite well is that we need to do whatever it takes in order to create new giant in new technology. We need probably to protect our industry, but at the end of the day, what we need is to create big companies, Netflix, Amazon, Alibaba. But in the European Union, we consider that you need to have always, every time, very fair competition. You need to avoid to have big companies that have very strong market share. But sometimes it's the only way to innovate. If we look back in time, when you have very important innovation, most of the time you have a kind of monopoly that is created in order to be able to invest a lot. In the US, at the end of the day, we are in a situation where you have many monopolies in new technology. This is more or less the same situation in China. And I think that the European Commission regulation regarding the competition is out of date. It is back in the 80s. Why not? When everyone in the 80s considered that the best scenario is very ultra-liberalism and it will be the best. But nowadays, it's 40 years afterwards. We need to understand that we need to be have a more balanced view regarding the competition in the European Union. And what we need is to merge companies. We need to stimulate the creation of very big companies. Maybe they will have a market share, very important, or some market price in the short term, but that's the only way to face the US competition and Chinese competition. I think that Germany and France understood it, but they have no leverage in order to force the European Commission to move towards the right direction. And this is a pity, because at the end of the day, we will, if we don't have a new giant, European giant, in terms of new technology, like 5G, for instance, we will need to choose between the US and China, and I don't think any of them is a good choice. So that's why I think we are lagging behind China and the US in terms of regulation, because we have this very strict and orthodox view that you need always to have fair competition, but that's not the right way in order to create new technology, to have a strong jump in terms of technology. Companies will only invest if they have for a period of time market price, a strong market price, and they will be able to have a strong market share. So I think this is a pity. I'm not optimistic regarding the way the European Commission is heading towards, because if you take a look at what have been agreed at Brussels, I mean, you have some billions that will go to innovation, that will go to relocation of supply chain, but this is not enough. Behind that, you don't have any vision regarding what you want to do. What do we want to do? Do we want the European Union to be focusing on electric vehicles? So we need to put a lot of money on that. We need to cooperate. We are not doing it. Do we want to create, I don't know, European Netflix? I don't know, but they have no project. But the only words they have in the mouth is green investment. But we don't know what we want to do. I mean, we want to do green investment because it's good for the planet. Yes, I agree. But at the end of the day, you need to choose what do you want to do. And so that's why I'm very skeptical. And I think that at the end of the day, the European Union will be a kind of protectorate, technological protectorate, either of the US or China. They will choose, but we won't have technological autonomy. I don't believe in that.
I totally agree with you. You know, the environment for business in Europe is not good for new companies to emerge, you know, for new companies to born and to grow, you know. Yeah. It's very good for the same companies to be as always they have been, you know, and plenty of politicians inside. This is what we have.
So this is in Spain, no? The same situation, no?
Yeah,
this is in Spain, but this is France, Italy, and this is a lot of countries, no? And of course, if this doesn't change, what I see, and I don't know, and I asked you about, is, and we have seen that, you know, during these years, we have this technological game, this technological war against China and United States, and the loser is Europe.
Exactly.
The loser in this war is Europe. So do you think this problem will make Europe a block, economical block, that is going to disappear in the decisions in the world, you know?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean, this is a big market. We know it's European Union is a big consumer market, but at the end of the day, if you look at international organizations, no one cares about the European Union, even at the United Nations. So imagine. I think that the European Union is not able to leverage its economic influence and turn it into political influence. I mean, when you look at the way they deal with Donald Trump or with the Chinese, they are not able to really have a strong influence on decision-making at the global level. Look at what has happened recently over the past years, actually, between the US and China. The trade war, the technological war. The European Union is not able to take stands and to have strong views to influence the situation. This is the pity. I think at the end of the day, and especially for some member states, the European Union is only an economic union, and that's it. They don't want to move politically and to be stronger politically, because I think it was interesting over the past days what the Dutch minister said. He said that at the end of the day, I will always defend my national interest. So there is no, regarding policymakers, there is no way they really think that we are a unified political union and that we want to fight for the same thing, we want to move towards the same direction. So in my view, it will be probably a very efficient economical and monetary union, but it will never really become a political union that is able to have a strong power in terms of global decision-making. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a shame, because actually in Europe, you know, if in Spain, for instance, there's people that they can grant their own flag, you know, like a symbol. So imagining here, or if you have to extend that view to the whole Europe, and we all want to be Europeans, I not see it. I don't see it. I don't see
exactly.
it.
I don't think it will happen. Yeah, I agree.
We should, it would be awesome, but I don't know. It's quite complicated here in Europe, but we'll see. We'll have to fight. Okay, I have another topic that I'd like to ask you, and in this case is what is your take on the economic perspective for the last quarter of the year? In this case, in a shortly period. Okay, the last quarter of the year. How do you see the economic perspective?
Very gloomy.
Very gloomy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst is already in front of us. It's not behind us. What we see is that, and I always look at China because I think China is a good way to understand how they have done a good job in terms of COVID management. But regarding the economic situation, you see that consumption is very low, that a lot of Chinese prefer to save money than to spend. So retail sales in June, it was still falling. You have the supply side. It means that governments were putting so much money on the table that some companies, they start to produce again. But at the end of the day, we know that this situation cannot last forever. I mean, in the European Union or in the US, at one point, direct liquidity injection to companies or to households, it will end. We know in the US it may end at the end of July. So what's going to happen? I don't think that households, they will keep spending a lot of money. They will save because they will see that bankruptcy are rising. You will have higher unemployment. So the only way to deal with that is you try to save because it will get harder. So I have obviously no view regarding the virus. I don't know what's going to happen next. But in terms of economic situation, I think we are entering in a period where we will face the second economic wave of the virus. From September, you will have higher level of bankruptcies. It will mean that you will have higher unemployment. And the problem with bankruptcies is that it will also destabilize the banking sector, meaning that I think from end of year, beginning of next year, we will have a lot of banks that will need to a very high ratio of non-performing loans. So the risk is clearly that the economic crisis turn into a banking crisis in some countries. I don't think it is the same situation than in 2012. I don't think so. It's not that bad because we have the banking union in the Eurozone, because I think most of the banks, they are much more capitalized. But at the end of the day, in some countries, I was looking at Greece. In Greece, I was very surprised, but in some big banks, you have like 50% of payment holidays. So it means that they don't pay actually for the moment, they don't repay the loans, represent 50% of the balance sheet. So imagine that on this amount, you have some companies that go bankruptcy, it will have a very strong impact on the non-performing loans ratio. So we cannot exclude that from, I would say, beginning of next year, we will have some banks that will be in very bad shape and we will need to use the banking union in the Eurozone to deal with this situation. I think this is a risk that has not been priced in the market. No one, I mean, I don't see many research is talking about the risk for the banking sector. But I think we need to keep in mind that we don't know yet the scale of bankruptcies. I am pessimistic. Hopefully I will be wrong and we won't have so much bankruptcies. But I see that in many economic sectors, the situation is really bad. So I am afraid that we will face a lot of bankruptcies, especially in countries where you have a big chunk of GDP linking to tourism sector. So obviously, at the end of the day, it will have an impact on the banking sector. And I think we need to keep in mind that it might be challenging for a lot of European banks in the coming quarters, I would say.
I totally agree with you. I think that, and you know, I take one word in all your answers that is pessimistic, and I love it because I'm totally pessimistic as well. You know,
I see.
Yeah. And in every single of your answers, you say, "I'm pessimistic. I'm pessimistic." Okay, great. we would like to be optimistic, but sometimes it's impossible in these European countries. Yeah. And my question, my new question was related to the banks and the situations of the banks. I know that more than 400,000 petitions, I think in March, were done to the Spanish banks for the mortgage to be, stopped because the people couldn't pay it. And this was, at the beginning of the shutting down. So I don't want to imagine what is happening today, And of course, the companies are in the same situation. So I don't think they are paying the loans, So of course, we are going to face a bank crisis, the second part of the crisis, as you say. And how this, in your opinion, is going to impact the euro, Because I think that we see right now a too strong euro regarding to dollar, no? Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there is a lot of irrationality when you look at the forex market. We see that the market sentiment is extremely positive for the euro versus the dollar, and I don't think this is the right way. Investors are extremely optimistic regarding the ECB, the European Recovery Fund. On the top of that, I would agree, obviously, that the Eurozone is handling much better the COVID situation than in the US. But at the end of the day, I think the gap in terms of COVID management will narrow, and I'm sure at the end of the day, the US probably Q3, Q4 of this year, the US will be able to handle the COVID much better. But the problem is that no one understands that at the European Union level, one of the key risks is clearly the banking sector. And if we have this banking sector crisis, I think clearly we should expect to have the euro much lower versus the dollar. I think 1.07 is the target. I think clearly already the market is way up too optimistic regarding the euro. I think it's almost close to 1.15. This does not make sense regarding the economic situation. And I still think that for the US, they will rebound much stronger than the Eurozone in terms of economic activity. So in my view, my target is still negative for the euro. I would say the first target is 1.12, 1.10, but at the end, I would expect to go back to 1.07.
Yeah, I got a question here, Christopher, regarding also the in this case this week. I mean, we are seeing like the dollar is weakening all the time, and there's this world reserve currency that is, of course, the dollar so far, but we see that maybe this era of this kind of world reserve currency, it's not over for sure, but it's getting closer and closer and closer. And we also see these other new currencies that Bitcoin and stuff. You think that, I mean, what is the balance that you see regarding this, the US dollar as a reserve, as the world reserve in the world? And if you think this new cryptocurrencies or Bitcoins, for example, could fight this top of the position?
Yeah. Well, I think we will face a new situation. Usually you have one global reserve currency that is being replaced by another one, like the US dollar replaced the sterling pound. But it will be a different situation. You know, like 10 years ago, I think it was something like that, or 5 years ago, a lot of analysts, they were expecting that the Chinese yuan will replace the US dollar. As a matter of fact, I don't think it will happen. I think we will move to a multilateral system where you will still have for a long period of time, the dollar being the strongest, the most important global reserve. But on the top of that, you will have much more competition from other fiat currency like the Chinese yuan. This is clearly obvious. And adding to that, you will have also stronger competition from cryptocurrencies. what is extremely interesting is that you see so many central banks all around the world. They are talking about implementing a new cryptocurrency system. I think almost every week I see one new central bank saying we are close to implement it. So this is also one way for a lot of countries to be less dependent from the US dollar. What we need to understand is that I think over the past 10, 20 years, everyone understood that being too dependent from the US dollar is, at the end of the day, negative for your economy. Emerging markets understand it quite well. So you need to have a more diversified international monetary system. It means that you will need to take in consideration the Chinese yuan because you don't have any choice. And I will say that China is doing a fine job in order to have the internationalization of their currency. But on top of it, I mean, I think we cannot avoid thinking that cryptocurrencies, not the Bitcoin, but probably other cryptocurrencies that don't exist already, they will have also a big chunk in terms of global reserve currency. I follow up some very weak emerging markets like Argentina, Venezuela, I know very well. And you see that in this kind of country, which is very surprising, is that cryptocurrencies are another way also. When you don't have access to the US dollar, this is another way also to deal with your money. So I have been, I would say, very skeptical for many years regarding cryptocurrencies. But I need to be realistic, and I think it will be part of global reserve. We cannot fight against it. And it will be part of it because actually central banks, they understand that you have no other choice but to accept cryptocurrencies. So at the end of the day, we won't focus on Bitcoin, clearly, but probably on new central bank cryptocurrencies that will be a new way to avoid being too exposed to the US dollar.
Yeah, I like this idea of having different, I mean, not only one, you know, having this balance between many currencies at a time. This is awesome. Lauren?
Link it with that, for my last question, link it with that is the point of all the money printing that is happening in the world.
Yeah.
And what is going to happen with the inflation, you know, because what I see, I don't know what you see, is a big inflation in the next years. And maybe, I don't know, we can go back to the 70s, to the situation that we had in the 70s in the economy. What do you think about that? Because, you know, in the 28, in the last crisis, there were a lot of printing, but this didn't come to an inflationary situation. But right now, could be we can face another totally completely situation. What do you think about that?
Well, in the short term, meaning at least I think until 2021, maybe 2022, I think the biggest risk will be deflation. We know that the coronavirus is mostly a deflation shock. If you take a look at China is falling slowly into deflation again, like in 2015, 2016. And if it happens, China will export deflation at the global level, and especially to the US. But it completely makes sense to fear that inflation after this period of deflation could happen, could get back. I think part of the explanation for not having such a strong inflation over the past 10 years is that you had a structural phenomenon pushing for deflation. It was a high level of debt. It was also the fact that you have strong inequalities. Increase in inequalities is usually linked to is another factor that pushes for deflation. New technologies is also deflationary. But it might change. It might change because I think that we see a lot of studies showing that inequalities might be reduced because you will have a strong push in the coming years for redistributive policies. We see it in the US. And if you have redistributive policies, it will mean that you will have probably higher inflation. On the top of that, one way also to deal with a high level of debt could be to have higher inflation. So I think central banks could be inclined to have inflation overshoot for a short period of time. We know the Federal Reserve and the ECB are discussing it. They consider that if you have inflation above 2% for a short period of time, maybe could be fine. So I would say the risk of inflation is real, but maybe like in 3, 4, 5 years after the long impact of the deflation. But obviously, if you are talking about investment, some people invest on very long term, and we see that a lot of people are looking for ways to hedge against inflation. If you are investing in the long term, it makes sense, obviously. But I think for the short period of time, this is clearly the risk of deflation that is popping up. And we need really to track what is happening in China, because it will be China that will export deflation at the global level.
There's this book called The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth that is awesome, and he has this theory, super weird theory about the deflation and inflation. It's really interesting, actually. One day we should discuss about that theory because it's awesome.
It's a big topic. It takes a lot of time. Yeah. We have so many ways to handle it.
Yes, totally. Okay, Christopher. So thank you a lot. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show again. And we will be discussing more about, as things are coming. And we will keep going with this series, always if you agree, because for us, for audience, it's really, really interesting. Thank you a lot, Christopher.
Thanks a lot.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Christopher. It has been a pleasure. I learned a lot listening.
It was always great to discuss with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.